Well, good morning, everyone. It's Saturday, April 11th, 2020. We're here at the Fort Worth Aviation Museum for another installment of Fun with Aviation. And today we're going to do a walk around of our museum's Republic F-105D Thunderchief. We're going to have some challenges, as you can hear. We're right here on the highway on Long Avenue, so we're going to hope that this works. And the weather's cooperating, so let's get started. So this is our museum's TF-105D Delta. It is an airplane that is on loan to us through the General Services Administration. And that's right, Mike James, it is Thud time. So the name Thud on this airplane, the TF-105, there seems to be a lot of different reasons for why it might be called the Thud. Part of it may be from Howdy Doody and Chief Thundercloud. There's also the reference to that's what it sounded like when the airplanes hit the ground when they were getting shot down over Thud Ridge. Whatever the name origin was, it is stuck with the airplane. And so this one we're going to walk around. I'm going to try to stay away from the street as much as possible, but that's not going to be completely accurate. So we can see by the tail on this one, the Modex is Tango Hotel. And Tango Hotel is the Modex for right here at in Fort Worth at the Joint Reserve Base. You can see it says it's an Air Force Reserve Squadron, and that's the 301st. Now what we also have here is it says AF 60385. What that stands for is it's an Air Force airplane. We've talked about these numbers before. 60 is the year that this one was built, and it was the 385th under that contract. There are not quite 900 of these made. Good, it's starting to rain, so we're going to do the best we can here. You can see this scoop right here by the stars and bars. The scoops were put on later after the original development of the aircraft because they tended to overheat and have fires in the engine, so it was a way to get more air into circulation through the compartment. Right now you'll see this big device under the wing is a fuel tank. We have a lot of people come out and go, oh, is that a bomb? No, this was a pretty normal configuration for the airplanes in Southeast Asia. It's a 450 gallon fuel tank, and it carried two of these. Normal bomb load was on the center line, although the configurations were variable. This airplane originally was designed to be a nuclear delivery system. It was supposed to come in low, fast, deliver a nuclear weapon, and get out of town. Well, by the time we got to the war in Southeast Asia and Vietnam, it became more of just an iron sight bomber. Even though it's called a fighter, it was never actually designed to be a fighter. The airplane was designed to replace the F-84 of Korean fame. So this airplane in many respects looks like an F-84. They changed some of it. They did the contour, the Coke bottle treatment with the fuselage. And one thing with this airplane that has always impressed me is how big it is. In pictures it doesn't look that big, but I can tell you one time I flew into Oklahoma at Tinker Air Force Base and parked my F4 right next to a 105, and I thought the F4 was bigger, and it just is not. The F-105 is actually a little bit bigger. In fact, one of the statistics out of the war was that these airplanes could drop more bombs than a B-17 or a B-24, which is an interesting comparison because the tail on the 105 is just about the same height as on a B-17, and it is only 10 feet shorter than a B-17. So much different than a B-17, obviously, but it also could carry more weapons than that could. So while we've got a chance here, one of the things that we can do with this airplane is we can see inside the Bombe, and that's a favorite of the kids here. Oh, one thing I want to mention up here, this is a Mach 2.25 airplane, Mach 2, honest Mach 2 airplane. It could outrun an F4. In fact, they would have fighter cover of F4s, and sometimes they just weren't able to keep up, and they weren't much good for them. So want to take a look at the canopy a little bit, because this airplane on the deck could do almost 900 miles an hour, 860 miles an hour. The problem with low levels, high speed with this airplane is that the canopy would start to melt. So they actually had to design a canopy that's a kind of a two-layer canopy and have coolant inside to keep the canopy from doing that. So we're going to go ahead and take a look in the Bombe. How many of you have been in a Bombe? Give me a thumbs up if you've ever been in a Bombe. Okay, so far I'm not seeing any thumbs up. And the OV-10 squadron mentioned for all of the kids home from school, this would be a great virtual field trip. Well, it is, because we've had some of the kids have been on here on some of these that we've done. Okay, I've got some thumbs up, so you've seen Bombe's. Well, I'm going to show you this one. If I can get the camera to go the way I want it to go. So this is the interior of the Bombe. This airplane was designed to carry one nuclear weapon in here. Now the difference between an F4Es and some of the others, what makes this a D, is that they changed this out and they started to put fuel tanks internally. So they could carry a fuel tank in here, which gave the range, far exceeded the range of the airplane without. But this was originally designed for a nuclear weapon. Now you may notice or not notice that there are no hinges. What we've got are rails like here that go up the side of the Bombe on both sides, and rollers. So as opposed to a B-17, which you would see in flight, and the doors would open to the outside, and then now I'm getting a low. There we go, low connectivity again. So instead of with a B-17 or something like that, that would be able to have doors that would open outside. When this thing is going Mach 1, Mach 2, you can't have doors open like that. So the doors in this airplane would actually slide up inside of the Bombe. Now sometimes when you're going that fast, a weapon doesn't want to leave the airplane. So sometimes you have to give it a bit of an assist. And that little bit of an assist is right here. That's called an ejector foot, and it's spring loaded, and that would be raised up and put into place, and then when it would be time to drop the weapon, that would actually kick the weapon out. We've talked before about the things don't go off just because you drop them from an airplane, but you also got a shell of air around the airplane, and you had to sometimes give it a little assist to get it out of the airplane. And so that's the big ejector foot, and it would just punch the weapon out of the airplane. So when they weren't carrying nuclear weapons and they had fuel tanks, then they could have a centerline on here. And there's talk about people would carry a centerline fuel tank and then carry bombs, Mark 82s usually, although a lot of Vietnam, they carried 1,000-pounders, 2,000-pounders, and even 3,000-pound weapons. Here's that pitot-static tube again. All of the airplanes have got them. They're a little bit different in each different airplane. And we haven't done this too much, but here's the wheel well, the nose wheel well on this airplane. So this nose comes up and slides right up and locks up in place. One of the things about Republic, and it was kind of a joke, but kind of not a joke, this airplane had a T-75 engine. That was an upgrade from the original engine that it carried. But there was always a joke that Republic could build an airplane. You could build a runway, and Republic could build an airplane that would use up every foot of that runway. So sometimes it took them a while to get off the ground. The rain's picking up a little bit here, so I'm gonna pick it up myself a little bit. You'll notice here that this side of the airplane is a different squadron, and you'll notice we've got Colonel Larry Pickett, who was the CO of the 354th when these airplanes were used in Thailand at Tak Lee. So this side of the airplane is in the Tak Lee paint scheme, and you'll notice here a couple of ribbons, the Presidential Unit Citation and an Air Force Outstanding Unit. Oh, we've talked about the pitot tubes and having a static port. That's a static port right there. It's a little silver thing with little holes in the middle. There's essentially no airflow over that piece of the airplane, so it measures that's static, and it measures the dynamic pressure on the other side. Angle of attack indicator. Just because it's an Air Force airplane and doesn't go aboard the boat doesn't mean you don't have to have an angle of attack indicator. So we're going to walk under the wing. We'll talk about it a little more from underneath here. So this airplane could potentially carry as many as 2,500-pound bombs. They did that to demonstrate it, but they didn't normally run it that way. The normal configuration would be 2 of these 450-gallon drop tanks, and then 6 weapons on the center line, unless they were carrying the big weapons, the big boys. So here's the Modex for this airplane. It says Romeo uniform, and we've talked about Modexes before. That's the Modex for the 354th Fighter Squadron at Tak Lee, Thailand, when it was at the Royal Thai Air Base in Thailand. This airplane, we're still not certain. We think it may have spent some time in Southeast Asia, but we know for sure it was in Iceland. But these airplanes got moved around a lot. You talk about Thud Ridge and the fact that there were so many of these airplanes that were shot down. There were 2 ingress points going into North Vietnam, and especially when they said they were going downtown, which meant they were going to Hanoi, and they would do that about once a week, but there would be flights that would go out morning and afternoon, and they had a very narrow passage that they could get through without having anti-aircraft being a real threat. So there were 860, I believe it was, somewhere in that range of these airplanes that were built. There were only 122 that survived the war. And of all of the fighter pilots who were shot down over North Vietnam and spent time in the Hanoi Hilton or other resorts of Southeast Asia, almost half of them were Thud drivers. Very proud group of guys. Their missions would, or their rotation would last 100 missions, and then they would rotate out. But most of them would joke about the fact that they'd get to about 66, and that's all they would get before they would get shot down. The rule of thumb was if they didn't pick you up within a few hours, you probably weren't going to get picked up. They oftentimes would not want to stay in an area and let people know where you were down, because that would pinpoint your location. So a lot of this took place during 64 and 65 in what was referred to as Rolling Thunder. And one of the problems with Rolling Thunder is it was being targets were being selected out of the White House as opposed to being selected by the military people in the Pentagon and places like that. Primary loss. Mike James is in primary loss from SAMs. They were to a certain extent. A lot of them were just simply anti-aircraft fire and that kind of thing. When the SAMs started to become real prevalent towards the end of the war, not the end of the war, but during the middle of the war, they had a 2-seat version of this airplane, and they flew a mission that were referred to as Wild Weasels. And these guys, I don't know how to put it any other way, but very, very brave people with large things. At any rate, what these guys would do is they would light up a SAM site, and they would follow the radar signature down towards the SAM site and try to take the SAM missiles out with air-to-ground missiles. I mean, they were going right into the teeth of the SAMs to do that, but it was to clear the way for the rest of the fighters coming in later on to drop bombs. Let's see, we got something else. 388 that Hill still had them until 81, 82. Yes, the airplane was used up until the 80s, and then it was pretty much retired. There are not many of them on view, so we feel very fortunate to have this one. Rain is letting up just a little bit, so I'm going to show you the interior of the wheel well here. That big opening right there is where the APU exhaust comes from. You need a small unit to start up the turbines and get them to moving, and so there's a small engine in there that would it's called an auxiliary power unit. Any guns? Oh yeah, guns. This was not a fighter by any stretch of the imagination. It could not turn with anybody. Really, it was designed to go straight and fast. It was designed to go in high, get down low, deliver a nuclear weapon, and go home. But for self-defense, it did have 20-millimeter cannon, and that's where the gun would come out right here. So the rain is letting up a little bit, so we'll walk around a little bit more. But we've got a nice view right here because we've got the 105 right next to one of our F4s. It's our QF4S, but it's an opportunity to really be able to take a look and compare the sizes of the two airplanes, which again is very similar, but you'll notice that the 105 sits up quite a bit higher. It's taller. It's a lot taller airplane. And on the other side, you can see our A7 and the A4. Somebody would like to describe the inlets on the engines. The inlets on these engines are a little bit different. This airplane was built for speed, and you can see here the Coke bottle effect, or the contour. You can see how it dips in behind, and this is the inlet for the engines. Built for supersonic flight, and there's a splitter to be able to control the airflow into the engine. Short stubby wings in a lot of respects. It's got a wingspan of almost the same as a Piper Cub. So let's see, what else can we do before it starts raining a lot more? It does have a tail hook. It's not a naval aircraft at all. It's not a naval aircraft at all, but a lot of Air Force airplanes, and most of them anymore, have a tail hook, and that's to be able to engage in overrun gear on the runway should the airplane be in distress or failed brakes. You can see the shoe right up in there. And let's see, Thud guns were credited with 2 or 3 MiG kills during Vietnam. Yeah, that's my understanding too. They were not a fighter, even though the Air Force likes to refer to a lot of their airplanes as fighters. This one was a bomber. It was designed and built from the ground up to be a bomber. You can see the tail cone here in the afterburner section is a little bit different because it's actually the speed brakes also. So they would open up like a flower petal when you'd land or you needed to slow down. And then this one has got some names in it. These are people who have been by the museum here and who flew the 105 and autographed our plug. Got Bill Lawson. Bill has been a supporter of the museum for a long time. He, in addition to having been the Brigadier General out here at Carswell and owning the squadron for a while, he's also been on our advisory board for quite a while. We've got Bobby Epperson. And we do this with some of the airplanes, not a lot of them, but it's designed for just the people who flew the airplane. It's not for everybody. So got down here, got about just a few minutes left, but I want to just do another little bit of a walk around so you can see the airplane more in its fuller state. You may notice we have some little wires up on the top of the tail. That was not a part of the airplane when it flew. That's something that we have to do here. It's referred to as bird mitigation. We can't mitigate all the birds, but we can try to keep them from sitting on top of things. Okay, Bob, you're welcome. We're glad to be able to do this. I was glad I was able to do this today too, because it was supposed to rain. I thought we were going to be canceled for rain here and have to do another indoor game, and I know people would prefer that we be outside for these things. And I'm going to walk around just a little bit more. Might notice underneath the ribbons, and I'll show a detail of that when we get back up there, but a blue light. Remember we talked about formation lights and marker lights? So on an airplane like this, you would be off the wingtip. You would be looking for probably that blue light at the wingtip when you're up airborne, a little bit above it, and with the pilot's head so that you could see the pilot's head. And so those are marker lights, and there's another one under the tail, blue light up there. So the normal missions that these airplanes would fly is they would go in together in large formations. They would fuel up off of the KC-135s, and then after After the mission was over, they delivered their weapons. It was every man for themselves, and they would just be trying to evade the area as quickly as they could to avoid the anti-aircraft and SAM missiles. Okay, well, the weather is picking up here, so I think we're going to call it a day for this morning. Once again, I'd like to thank you for joining us here at the Fort Worth Aviation Museum, home of the most touchable warbirds in Texas. I hope you've enjoyed this walk around of our F-105 Delta Republic Thunderchief. Y'all have a good Easter, as good an Easter as you can possibly have, and enjoy the weekend. Stay safe. We need to have you all back in here to visit with us. And again, if you've enjoyed these a little bit, we'd appreciate a buck or two in that little donation jar up at the top. Thanks again, folks. Have a good Easter. Stay safe. Wash your hands and stay away.